Okay, everyone. So we're middle of the Gemara in Megillah Zayin Amid Beis 7b, and we're learning the laws of different things of comparison of either times or laws. We're going to go through Mishnah after Mishnah. We'll go back a bit. So I say Mazel Tov to my daughter and son-in-law Musi and Mendel. Just had a baby boy this morning, our time, the evening in New York. Let's bring up the text here. Okay, so I'm going to go back a little bit. We're holding the Mishnah. We did the Mishnah last week again. So we learned the Mishnah before about the comparison of Shabbos and Yom Tif. So now it says like this. The Mishnah says, we learned this last week. We're just going to go back. Ein bein Shabbos le'Yom HaKippurim ela shezez doinoi shezez doinoi bidei li'Yom Kippur mel shezez doinoi bidei adam zez doinoi bekares. That on Shabbos, if one violates the Shabbos, obviously with warning and witnesses, then the punishment is to be put to death by person, meaning by the Bezdin, by the Sanhedrin. And Yom Kippur is punishable by Karis, which is cut off by Hashem, which means it's the death by God. Okay. So Rashi says right away, hey Bruce, good to have you back. We're just starting a Mishnah that it talks about in these laws of what is the difference between Shabbos and Yom Kippur. So we said Shabbos, one who violates the Shabbos with witnesses and warning is punishable, like we learned in the Gemara Sanhedrin, by the Sanhedrin, punishable by death by the Sanhedrin. And one who violates transgresses the laws of Yom Kippur is punishable by kares, which is death from heaven. So again, there's obviously other laws that are different, as we're going to learn. For instance, right away the commentaries ask, there's other differences. Shabbos is a day that you could eat and drink. That's the mitzvah, is to eat and drink. And Yom Kippur is a fast day, so that's another difference. But we're talking about the difference in how to keep the holiday. The fasting is the holiday; it's a day of a fast. So we're talking about is keeping the laws of the holiday. So then we have a difference between the punishment. This is punishment by Bezdin. This is a punishment by the side by heaven. Hey Josh. So Rashi says, "Misi b'dei adam yesh ba misas Bezdin." That in the Shabbos, one is punished by the Sanhedrin. Let's just learn again. We learned this last week, but we'll go through it quickly again. The Reb Steinsaltz says, for all labors, for which one is liable to be stoned, which is the Misa of Kares on Shabbos, one is liable to receive Kares on Yom Kippur. Means the same, anything that you're not supposed to do on the Shabbos, if you do it on Yom Kippur, on Shabbos you get punished by the Kares. If you do it on the Yom Kippur, you get punished by Kares, which is by, so to say, God. All actions prohibited by rabbinic law, that's biblical law. Rabbinic law on Shabbos are similarly prohibited on Yom Kippur, although one who performs them is exempt from punishment. The punishment is not the same for the rabbinic laws. There is an additional difference between labor performed on Shabbos and labor performed on Yom Kippur with regard to damage caused to the property. Okay, he's bringing on the Shulchan Aruch. This is the Gemara is going to ask. Okay, I just want to bring the rule of the law. The rule of the law is that when you have two punishments, so if you've done one action and that single action could cause two responsibilities, one would be a punishment from God and one would be monetary loss. Let's say you burn someone's house down. So if you burn someone's house down on Shabbos, you caused the fire on Shabbos. So then that's a violation of the Shabbos. Aside from that, you also burn someone's property. So you owe that person money. So in the law on Shabbos is that if you do something like burn someone's house down because you're being punished, we look at the larger violation, which is the transgression of Shabbos. And therefore you're not obligated to pay the monetary loss. So here he says that another difference is that there's an additional difference between labor performed on Shabbos and labor performed on Yom Kippur with regard to damage caused by the property of another while performing the prohibited labor. In other words, burning another's field. If you burn down another person's field on Yom Kippur, he is obligated to pay for the damage. On the Shabbos, he's exempt. As the halacha rules, contrary to the opinion of Rechunya ben Hakana, who rules that he is exempt from payment on Yom Kippur as well. So we're going to learn, he's bringing down the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch brings down the law. The law is, if you burn down someone's house or field on Yom Kippur, you have to pay the monetary loss, even though you're going to be punished by God. But our Mishnah doesn't agree with that. Our Mishnah, we're going to see this footnote's a little too early. It should have been in the Talmud a little later. All right, what is kares? Okay, again, the rule is, we're going to see the rule is a little more complicated. The rule is that when we go with a bigger violation or bigger responsibility, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be punished. Means, for instance, if for whatever reason you don't get the punishment of death for Shabbos, you still don't have to pay for the damage. Same thing would apply according to Rabbi Kana, like we're going to learn soon with regard to Yom Kippur, because what you've done was a thing that in theory could be punishable by death on Shabbos, even though, let's say, the actual burning on Shabbos was done in a way that you wouldn't be obligated for the Shabbos. Let's say there wasn't warning or it was shogeg, etc. What is kares? What does kares mean? Again, we've learned this a little bit more in Sanhedrin, and there's a whole tractate called Krisus, which is about the laws of transgressions that are punishable by kares. Kares is more severe than misa b'dei shemaim, the being put to death by heaven. The word kares means to be cut off, so it's kind of it's a stronger punishment from God. Kares is divine punishment administered for serious transgressions. The commentaries dispute its precise parameters. Among the characteristics of kares are the premature or sudden death, no children, or death of one's children. Sorry, my computer is freezing up a second. Okay. The soul doesn't have a portion in the world to come. In the tractate of kares, 36 transgressions punishable with kares are enumerated. All are prohibitions with the exception of two, meaning all of them are lo sases, the exception of two, which are the one is if you don't bring the paschal lamb, and the other one is a bris, if you don't perform a circumcision on yourself. Once you become older, you have an obligation to circumcise yourself. If your parents have not, or the bezdin has not, if you die without a circumcision, then you get kares. Kares is administered only one who commits the transgression intentionally. In many cases, if the transgression was committed in the presence of witnesses, the transgressor is subject to execution administered by the court. There are some cases where you would still be punished by the court, or lashes. Anyone who violates one of the prohibitions punishable by kares unwittingly is liable to bring a sin offering as an atonement. So kares is a severe punishment where you either die young or your children die, or other, God forbid, things that happen. Again, the only positive commandments that have kares is circumcision. You have to circumcise yourself. If you don't, you're liable to kares, and you have to bring the paschal lamb. If you willingly and can, and you don't, you get punishable by kares, which is, again, kares means to be cut off. Okay. So now the Gemara says, so what is the difference between Yom Kippur and Shabbos? Is only the differences between the punishment. Shabbos is a punishment by the bezdin, by the court, and Yom Kippur is punishable by God. The Gemara says, 1 second. There's other differences. Like we learned, again, this footnote was a little early. Like we learned, but with regard to payment, they're both equal, meaning if someone does a transgression on Shabbos, that you have to remember something else. It's in the transgression itself, the same act has to cause two things. Not you do two acts next to each other, that one is causing damage and one is violating the Shabbos. It's the act of violating the Shabbos that causes the damage, like burning down someone's property. If you burn down someone's property, the act of burning on Shabbos is setting fire, which is a violation of the Shabbos, and it happens to be, what did you set fire to? Someone else's property. So you have a monetary responsibility. In the case of Shabbos and monetary responsibility, the Shabbos is the primary violation, and therefore you can't have kamle b'derabimine. We go with the more severe one, and therefore you don't have an obligation to pay the monetary damages, even, this is the catch, even if you don't get put to death by the Sanhedrin for whatever reason. But so initially we think that Shabbos, same thing would apply to Yom Kippur. If you do something on Yom Kippur, let's say the same thing, you burn down on Yom Kippur someone's property. Burning down on Yom Kippur would be a violation punishable by kares. Nevertheless, the kares is being put to death by God, and therefore you don't have to pay the monetary responsibility. Who holds of that? Who's of that opinion? That in a case of, see, I'm not going to go to the logic of it, because even the logic of it is difficult. Because if you get put to death is one thing. But if you're not going to get put to death, so why should I not pay for someone's damage if I didn't get put to death? I mean, I didn't get the punishment. Even though what I did was punishable, I didn't get the punishment. So I'm not responsible for the monetary responsibility. That's another discussion. But there's seemingly no reason to apply God's punishing someone to someone's, to say, well, God punishes me, I don't have a monetary responsibility to the next person. Who holds that we do? That we do say that. It means that we do say that if God punishes a person with death, premature death, what have you, then you don't have a monetary responsibility if the act that causes the premature death was also damaging to someone else. That's an opinion of Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana. We'll see who Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana is in a second. Rabbi Steinzas tells us he was a very spiritual person, not just a Talmud, a scholar of the Talmud, of the Mishnah, but also a very spiritual person. There's a lot of prayers that we say daily that are attributed.
Rabbi, I have a quick question.
Right.
Where would you go to decide which of those two punishments needs to be done? Do you bring up like a base 10 of 3? Like, who makes the decision that one is more strict than the other, so we're not going to do it? Like, someone has to sit down and oversee that interaction, right?
No, it's in this case, Kamlei b'din Rabbi would apply if most cases are straightforward. Shabbos is punishable by death. Monetary money is a money question. So we could come into questionable. I have to remember all the scenarios. If there's even possible 2 death punishments, we've learned before in Sanhedrin where a person could do a violation that could have, of the 4 deaths, you could get both of them, and maybe not for the same act, but so you always go with the more strict one. And
right. I mean, calling back to Sanhedrin, we spent the first parak goes really deeply into how many people you need for different types of crimes,
yes.
for the rabbinical oversight. And so, imagining a situation where someone, violates the Shabbos in a way where they would deserve stoning. Maybe they burn down a building and a person dies inside of it. Now there's a death involved. You have a larger Sanhedrin than you would if it was just a violation of the Shabbos. So I'm just curious where where a hierarchy of like who would make those decisions even comes from.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, in theory, the Chacham, I mean, that would, again, anything that's involved in death would have to be a 23-person court. But yes, to see such an
Yeah, but
scenario,
something involving Shabbos doesn't need 23 people.
Shabbos is punishable by death. It needs 23. 3 people, not enough.
No, I thought it needed more than 23.
Anything that's anything inside for major things like Zaki Mamre or other big things has to be
Right.
70 only. But in anything that's just your regular death sentence is a Sanhedrin of 23.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious if there was ever situations with this where like jurisdiction would end up becoming a problem.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to. Yeah, they would have to. I mean, it would have to. All points would have to be taken into account. Also, it has to be clear that it was a single act, not 2 separate acts. Because once it becomes 2 separate acts, again, we have other cases where, for instance, of if a person claims that someone's if someone's claiming that someone's daughter was not a virgin and she had relations after they got engaged, and therefore they'd be put to death, and that and then there's Edi Zaymimim that it turns out that the witnesses themselves were lying. So therefore, what happens is that they're causing both. They have to be put to death because they were trying to cause her to be put to death, and also they were trying to eliminate the father's monetary. The father gets compensated monetarily by the husband because she didn't do anything wrong and he accused her. So they're a case where there's a monetary and a death sentence, and over there we discussed in Sanhedrin how it's two separate things and it's not so clear that they would have to pay the monetary because it's the two separate people. If I remember correctly, I don't know, maybe you remember better than me. If I remember correctly, in that case where there's Eidi Zaimimim about a Nara Ma'ursa, that she was engaged woman. So, and they lied, the witnesses lied. So when they lied, then they get put to death for trying to cause her to be put to death. And they try to take away the father's monetary benefits for the husband to be for lying and talking negative about his daughter. So there's a lot of questions, you're right, that have to be calculated. And all these would have to be calculated by a Beis Din at least of 23, a Sanhedrin of 23.
Gotcha. All right, thanks.
Okay. You're welcome. So who is this opinion that the Yom Kippur, that Kares, is also, we say Kamle Midrabim, we say that we go with the more severe one. So they say Rabbi Nachuni ben Akana. So Rabbi Nachuni ben Akana. The Tanya Rabbi Nachuni ben Akana says, Rabbi Nachuni ben Akana says that Shabbos and Yom Kippur are the same when it comes to monetary payments, where you do not pay the monetary payment if the monetary damage was caused by something that would also cause the person to be put to death, even if the person is getting put to death by God and not by the Beis Din. Just like Shabbos, if a person does an act that is be put to death, and therefore you are not obligated for the monetary damage done at the same time. A person who has to be put to death, is not exempt in this case from monetary responsibility to payment. Let's see the Rashi's over here. Again, this is a complicated concept of how we look at this case, and there's a base for it. The base for it we're going to see in a second. Af Yom Kippur mischai benafshe the Isser Kares K'Mrs. Beis Din Dami. Rabbi Nachuni ben Akana says that at the end of the day is if you're being put to death by God, so it's like being put to death by courts, and therefore you're punished by death, and you don't have to pay monetary payment because you don't get two punishments for one act. He gives an example. Let's say you set aflame a field that's monetary value of your colleague on Yom Kippur, because you caused the fire. A fire itself is a violation of the Yom Kippur that would put you to death, and you did monetary damage of burning down someone's gadish, which is someone's field. In a case where there is no asain, there is no tragedy, meaning that the person doesn't get put to death and you have to pay, you get punished. But if there is a punishment of an act, this is talking about a woman who if you strike someone and the person doesn't die, but the person gets damaged, so you have to pay for the damage. But the person would die, so you murdered, and if you're murdered, then you don't have to pay for the damage. Let's see the Reb Steinsaltz. Rashi, we just learned Rashi. Rashi learns seemingly that what Rashi is saying basically would apply to any kares. Any act that you're killed, you'd be put to death by God, and being put to death by God for the same act would cause monetary damage. Seemingly, Rabbi Nachuni ben Akana would say that you don't have to pay the monetary damage. But the problem is, if that's the case, then the wording shouldn't have been that we make Yom Kippur like Shabbos. It should just say we make the kares like Mrs. Beis Din, because this would apply to all kares according to Rashi. Their other opinions don't agree with Rashi. Other opinions say that Rabbi Nachuni ben Akana is only talking about Yom Kippur, not talking about all kares cases. Only that he makes an exception for Yom Kippur. Who says that? I think the Turi Zav Evan says, the Yerushalmi everything brings that. Rabbi Nachuni ben Akana, and there's others who say that some say that it's in all cases, but Rabbi Nachuni ben Akana is only talking about the case of Yom Kippur. What's the reason for it? Doesn't say. Okay, let's see the. Hold on a second. Okay, I think we're going to see Tosfos in a second. Mischai ben Ashi, liable to receive the death penalty. As a rule, one is not liable to receive two punishments for two transgressions, violations simultaneously. The principle is one is liable to receive the greater punishment, which is death, obviously, versus monetary responsibility. Again, even though, as far as the person's field goes, he says, what does it have to do with me? I mean, you being put to death is between you and God. You burnt down my field. It's not like the person who's been damaged gets some sort of compensation that's greater than money. It's the only person that we're really looking at is the person who transgressed, which is the person who violated the Yom Kippur or the Shabbos. But as far as the guy the person who owns the field, in theory, the person would be saying, what's that have to do with me? It means I'm not getting compensation because he's getting a greater punishment, but that's between him and God. So I'm not going to get into the depth of it because it's more complicated than that. But seemingly, the foundation of this idea is Kol Yisrael Revim Zelazeh. That's not so simple. That another person's violation has something to do with you. It means all the Jewish people are like a single body. So it's not just like my personal issue with God. Your personal issue with God, even though it's you and God and you get the punishment, it affects everyone. Hold on, Aaron. It affects everyone. And therefore, there is some sort of connection to you, and therefore you don't get the monetary benefit. Yes, Aaron.
I don't understand because I was taught if I break something to someone, so burning down the field is the same as breaking something, you have to pay double.
Okay, the double
So
is
if you
only,
get the work, what?
the double is only in the case where you're not taking responsibility. And if you break something, you only have to pay for your damage. You don't have to pay double. The double is if you steal something and then you lie and you said you didn't steal it.
Okay, but so you're saying if I burn down the field, I only have to pay single.
No, you don't have to pay anything. If you burn down the field on Yom Kippur, and you're going to get put to death for burning down something on Yom Kippur, you're not allowed to start a fire on Yom Kippur, right?
Okay, but let's say I burn down your field. So you're going to lose out. No matter what happens to me, you're out.
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's
But that's what I don't understand. Why do you have to be out?
I understand what your question is. It's a good question, but the Torah doesn't look at it so straightforward as you're saying, because at the end of the day is that Torah looks at it from a bigger picture, a bigger perspective. And not only that, it's not what you're arguing makes sense. What you're asking is a very good question. But that's if you look at it that I have nothing to do with you and you have nothing to do with me. All I know is you burnt down my field. If you violated the Shabbos, that's between you and God. It has nothing to do with me. That's what you're saying, basically. You burnt down my field. I need compensation. But first of all, from the perspective of the person who did something wrong, Torah punishes that person. So Torah says you're being punished, you have to pay monetary. But you're being punished for something larger. You're being punished for Shabbos, and that's a death penalty. Still, that has nothing to do with me. So the point is, it does have something to do with you. Because in the bigger picture, all the Jewish people are like a single person. And as a single person, there is something happening to you by that person being put to death. And you may not look at it that way and say, well, I don't want to view it that way, but the God is not asking you. Because all the Jewish people have responsibility for each other in keeping the Torah mitzvahs. I know it may be hard to take in such an idea, but that's the principle of the rule. One is liable to receive a greater punishment. There's an additional principle. That is, in the case of a prohibition punishable by death, even if the punishment is not implemented, now it gets even different. Even due to lack of testimony or forewarning. Let's say, right, there was no witnesses. Or there was no hasra, there was no warning. The mere fact that the prohibition is associated with a stringent punishment exempts the one who violates it from the lesser punishment. So here, let's say the person burns down on Yom Kippur. There's no warning and there's no witnesses. Or Shabbos. There's no death penalty because you can't put the death penalty without warning and without witnesses. You still don't have to pay for the damage you caused because what you did was something that would, in theory, could have been punishable by death. The dispute here is with regard to karis. Because it's not punishment administrated by the court, perhaps these principles do not apply. And Rabbi Chuni ben Akana says it does apply. According to Rashi, it applies in all cases of karis. Other commentaries disagree with Rashi and says we're only talking about exclusively Yom Kippur, but not other karis cases. All right, we could discuss this around for a long time to try to get to the logic of it, but this is the halacha of Torah. There's clear verses to support this halacha about even if the punishment is not punishable, even if we don't carry out the punishment, but the act was punishable in theory by death, you still don't have to pay the monetary compensation. Again, it also depends how you look at the payment. If the payment is making good to the person, or is the payment a punishment to you? So this has to be analyzed on the laws of Nezikim, how we look at Nezikim. Everyone looks at it like I have to be made right. It's not so simple. Maybe is it that you have to be made right, or that the person has to pay for the damage? Again, if you look at everything from the perspective of God, right? If a person's field gets burnt down, there's two separate things that are happening over here. One is that someone burnt down your field. And the second thing is your field was burnt down. Now, we believe that's an accepted thing in Hashkafa, that if something happens, God wanted it to happen. So it was a question of if this person's going to burn down your field, or lightning's going to strike and burn down your field, or you're going to burn down your field by mistake, your field had to be burnt down. Nothing to do with the person who burnt it down. So the fact that your field had to be burnt down, that was pre-decided before the person burnt it down. God found the person to do it for whatever reason and chose that person to burn your field down. So he gets punished for doing something that for whatever reason that God found that he has to pay something. So therefore he put it in his mind to burn it. That's the way we learn Torah, right? David HaMelech said, Shimi cursed him. He says it wasn't Shimi cursing him. God cursed him. Shimi, he put it in God's mind to curse. And that's a part of the whole theology of Torah, how we look at it. So it's not so simple how we look at any kind of monetary responsibility. Forget the case of Shabbos. All right, Rabbi Nechoni ben Akana. Who's Rabbi Nechoni ben Akana? Rabbi Nechoni ben Akana was a Tana, meaning a rabbi in the times of the Mishnah, during the generation of the Second Temple, when the Second Temple was destroyed, meaning in the times of around Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Gamliel. It is possible that he was the same Tana occasionally referred to as Rabbi Nechoni the Great. Apparently, he had a close relationship with the students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. A few of Rabbi Nechoni ben Akana's halachic statements were preserved. However, several agadic statements are cited in his name. The prayer that we recite upon entering the study hall, the Gemara in Bracha says, we have a famous Gemara that says that Rabbi Nechoni ben Akana would always daven before he went to the hall, making sure that he only said positive things and there's only good outcome to his study in the hall, is widely known as he was the one who authored it, so says the Mishnah. Later, in the same tractate, his positive attributes and his modesty are recounted. Rabbi Nechoni is credited with the development of the rule of Klal Uprat. He was also the teacher of Rabbi Yishmael, which is generally attributed to Rabbi Yishmael. His most prominent students, Rabbi Yishmael. So if everyone knows that before we daven on the weekday, we say the 13 Torah rules. One of them is the Klal Uprat. He's the author of the Klal Uprat. He's also the author of the Kabbalistic work Sefer HaBayer, which is very famous. And he's also the one who authored the Ana B'Koach. So the Ana B'Koach prayer, which is a very, very holy prayer, with the name of God, a number of 42, which we say daily, the Ana B'Koach, is attributed to Rabbi Nechoni ben Akana. So he's not someone to be taken just lightly like that. Okay. The Gemara continues. Tanya Hasan. Kol Chai V'Krisis Shelaku Nifter Midei Krisasan. There's another rule about Karis which is very interesting. Rambam brings this down la Halacha, and that is that what happens if you do a violation of Karis? The Torah says if you do it, you get cut off, but you did it publicly, so you get lashes. Does the lashes cancel out the punishment of Karis? Which basically means the only time you'd really get kares is if you had warning, witnesses, and there was no lashing. So it says kol chai v'krisis shalak nifter midei krisasan. Once you get the lashes nullifies your punishment of death by God. Because it says v'nikla achich leinecha, that your brother shall be dishonored before you. Even shalaka once he gets lashes, hariyuka achicha, he's like your brother, means no longer a person who's going to be put to death. Div Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel, so says Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel. Rabbi Yochanan chalukan lav chaver, Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel. Rabbi Yochanan says that not everyone agrees with Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel. So Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel, not sure who Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel is. I mean, Gamliel is usually a family of Beis Rebbe, of the house of Hillel. So Chananya ben Gamliel says that once you get malchus, but the Rambam quotes this, once you get malchus, you don't get kares. Once you get lashes, you don't get punishable by God. And Rabbi Yochanan says, he doesn't say who the friends are or why the friends disagree, but the friends of Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel don't agree with him and say, no, even if you get lashes, you still get punishable by death. So what does he say? Kol chayav ikrisis shalaku shehusru behen edim alav she'imay karetz v'laku bezin. If you had warning and you had witnesses, so then you get lashes. Niftru midei krisas and shuv ein bezin shamayl nifroim. Then heaven court doesn't pay them with the punishment of death. And he quotes over here, all who violate the prohibitions and were flogged are rehabilitated. Similarly, one who is liable to receive kares and was flogged is exempt from punishment of kares, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. So says the Rambam in Sefer Shoftim Hilchas Sanhedrin. Yes, Shruki.
I was going to ask something specific about this because this is an interesting quote, because if I feel correctly that it's brought up in Sanhedrin at one point, where the whole point of it was to talk about the fact that once the person got their lashes, when it says that they're your brother again, it means that you're not supposed to even hold their reputation as having been damaged. Like you did the crime, you got your punishment, you're an upstanding member of society again. I don't see how that applies here. It feels like they're trying to use that same principle for two different things.
Say that again.
It feels like over here I'm a little confused as to why that principle gets brought up over here. That idea of like rehabilitation, because the term doesn't, like, the word rehabilitation in English doesn't do it justice. Like in Sanhedrin, it specifically said that like a person who's received their punishment is an upstanding member of the community.
So you're saying that because the lashes is too light?
Yeah. Because if you consider them rehabilitated, then as if they had never done anything wrong, you're not even supposed to let it hurt their reputation in business and other things. And so, like over here, it feels like that because of that gracefulness we have when someone's gotten their punishment, it feels like it's too lenient.
What you're saying is a very good point, and actually, this pasuk v'nikla achicha leinecha is actually a chiddush. Means, like you say, it should be attributed to just a person who did something that was initially told that your punishment would be lashes. So the lashes is the appropriate punishment. Whereas if the punishment is death, and lashes is obviously less stringent than death. So it doesn't feel like you paid your dues, so to say, for your violation. But actually, that's the point. The point is that the pasuk is machadish that even in a case where you have kares, according to Nechuni ben Gamliel, that even in a case that you have kares, once you get the lashes, you should become a chicha. That's how most people learn.
That was to make sure that the rabbis didn't go lifnei mishur sadin.
No, that they should go lifnei mishur sadin. That means even though you should.
They should.
They're saying even though you should get punishable by death, and seemingly the malchus should not exempt you from that obligation. Malchus is malchus; it's not death. At the end of the day,
right.
If you have to give anyone a choice, as painful as 49 as 39 lashes will be. And it's painful, mind you. It's not death. So obviously, most people would pick lashes over death. And not only that, they couldn't even lash you to the point of death. So it could be a scenario where
and just as an aside, Josh mentioned to me also on the side that this is similar to why people get lashes right before Yom Kippur.
It is. That's a big.
It is too.
Yeah. So Amar Rav says now. So Rav says if that's the case, that Yom Kippur and is kares, and if you get lashes according to Mechoni ben Gamliel, then that's basically your punishment. So Amar Rav says Amar Bei Rav. They said in the school of Rav, Tanina ein ben Yom Kippur Shabbos al shezuz daini b'yedei adam v'zuz daini b'kares. We just said that the difference is that Shabbos is punishable by man, and Yom Kippur is punishable by kares. According to Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, both of them are punishable by man, because lashes is also obviously carried out by man. Like Rashi says, means if you say that you still get punished by God, so the lashes is just the icing on the cake in a negative way, so to say, but you're still going to get a more severe punishment. So therefore, Yom Kippur is different. But if I'm getting only lashes and I'm not going to get a separate punishment, so both of them are being administrated by man. One is punishable by death, one is punishable by lashing, but both of them by man. And if you're going to get punished by lashes, then lashes is your punishment, and you don't get the death penalty. So it's also a tribute. It's also something that happens by man. So why are we saying that's the difference? There's no difference then between Yom Kippur and Shabbos. Although it's not 100% a legitimate question, because why? Because there's the difference between death and lashes. You're saying is that, but the wording saying that one is God and one is man, it's not the right wording, because this is also man, even if it's not the same type of punishment. So the Gemara says, Hamani. So who's our Mishnah that says that the difference is karis, one is by God and one is by man? Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Malkus b'chai v'krisis leka. He says there is no lashing by krisis, and therefore there's no lashing, there's no exemption, there's a punishment only by death, by God. The Tanya Rabbi Yitzchak Omer, chai v'krisis b'chlal hayu v'lama yatsu karis v'achaisai lidem mikaris v'lei b'malkus. Okay, before we get to his answer of his limud, hold on a second, Shuki, which basically gives us three opinions. One opinion is Reb Chanina ben Gamliel, that kares it also gets malchus, and if you get malchus, if you get lashes, you don't get the actual punishment of death. The second opinion is Rabbi Yochanan, who says the rabbis disagree with him. The rabbis disagree with him, seemingly, that you get lashes and you still get kares. The third opinion is Rabbi Yitzchak, who says if you get kares, you don't get lashes. And then there's the fourth difference, and then there's Reb Nechuni ben Makana, who says that both kares and death penalty exempts you from monetary responsibility. Yes, Shuki.
Sorry, I'm just trying to wrap all of this up in my head in the most makes sense to me way.
Yeah.
But it seems like what we're doing here, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like what we're doing is that we're leaning on the more stringent punishment so that we, the human, can be more lenient.
We're leaning, or we're lenient?
Meaning if there's a choice between a punishment like monetary damages, right, which would cost a person a lot of money, ruin their life, there is no rehabilitating from that. They messed up, like there's going to be a long-term consequence of that. But because they did it on Yom Kippur, we know that there's going to be this punishment from above, this more severe punishment. And in many of those cases, a person wouldn't even be put to death. But then because they had that judgment made on them, we say they don't have to deal with the money because it's more lenient now. Right.
Exactly.
And so we're using the more stringent so that we can be more lenient and let Hashem deal with it after the fact.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not sure I 100% agree with that. I hear what you're saying, because you're looking at it, if you're putting it in an Excel sheet and going to the bottom line, that would be your result. That basically the severity is really a benefit for you, because you're not going to get the kares and you're not going to get the monetary responsibility, and then it turns out that you're benefiting from your acting severe benefits you monetary. If you just went on a regular Sunday, if you went and burnt someone's field down, obviously you would have to pay for it. The fact that you did it on Yom Kippur, which is punishable by death because you made a fire, so then according to Nechuni ben Akana, so then the fire, which is punishable by kares, would exempt you. It's more severe than the monetary, even though it's very unlikely you're going to get the kares, because it's very hard to do it in a way that there's witnesses and
Right.
warning. And according to Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, if you would get malchus, then you wouldn't end up getting the kares anyways, even if you did have warning. And seemingly we didn't learn yet what happens if you get the kares. Seemingly you would also still get the exemption of you'd still get the exemption of the monetary. And turns out that you committed the perfect crime, which means the most you could end up suffering is 39 lashes. If you get them, if you have the witnesses and warning, and you don't have to pay for your damage, you could have burnt down a $100 million building.
Right. But
So,
by doctrine, the Sanhedrin intends to not be bloody, right? Like one bloody in every 70 years. So like this is like there's one way to look at it is like the person committed the perfect crime. The other way to look at it is like there's no matter what you do, we still accept you, we rehabilitate you, you're part of our family again. And like it's just it seems like it's something that the Sanhedrin does, frequently when it comes to like leaning on the more lenient. But in this case, it seems like it's an opportunity to lean on something more stringent so that you get a more lenient punishment in this world.
Yes and no. Again, but like I was telling Aaron, the way we look at it is that the Torah doesn't look at you burning down someone's field as one act that happened, or that there's the field that was burnt down by you and it belonged to him, and therefore you have to compensate that person because you've damaged his damages. The Torah doesn't 100% look at it that way. Damages and the person being damaged the correlation is not 100%. Because like I said before, if a person's field gets burnt down, is because God wanted that person's field to get burnt down. And there's many ways for him to do it. He could just cause natural causes that could cause something to destroy, earthquakes. There's a lot of ways someone could get damaged. A damage is going to happen one way or the other. And the person who's doing it, that's what you say, that megalgalin schus aydei zakai, that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. I mean, God found because you're a person who's ready to do something wrong, God kind of took care of two people in one time. But it's two people. One person is the person who had to get the field burnt down, and the person that had to do the burning. And in a case where God wants it to be compensated, so it happens in a case on a Monday. In a case where God says that I don't even want that person to be compensated, it's going to happen on Yom Kippur where he doesn't get compensated and he still gets, it says it's not 100, it's not 100%, 1 + 1 = 2. There's more dimensions than it's much more dimensional than that, because God has to see everything from everyone's perspective simultaneously. He looks at when you have 1 million people, 1 billion people, God looks at each person as an individual, and he has to move the chess pieces around. While not, it's not just, when you don't get a parking and the next person gets that parking, right? You're trying to make a turn, you're about to go in and someone comes in and takes it. It's not someone took my parking. Why do you have the parking more than the next person? That person also needs a parking. God has to look at it from everyone's perspective. God has to make everything fit with everyone getting punished and rewarded or what have you, or a little tough love, or all this has to be happening simultaneously in 1 million pieces. So it's not just so simple that it's more complicated than how we would maybe view it. But at the end of the day, what you're right. At the end of the day, it turns out the bottom line is that the strict of it benefits the person in the way that the person sort of say is, like you said, is able to come back into the fold of love without having the severe punishment, which possibly the monetary punishment could be worse in a way than the lashes itself. Does that make sense to you, Shuki?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It's a little, like I said, it's more complicated. It's easier for us. We always look at things vis-a-vis ourselves. So that person took my parking, or that person got my job, or that, that, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not as simple as that. Rashi says this. Go ahead.
As I say, it's also complicated living in 2026, trying to put yourself into the headspace of someone from the year 200, right? And so it's a very different, perspective, like how we treat crime versus the way that they treated crime, when this was all being written down.
It doesn't change. Torah is everlasting. Torah is not.
No, I know Torah is everlasting, but the world around us influences a lot of things, including the way that we think about things. And so there's by halacha this is right or wrong, and then also there's the cultural, Medina, the rules of the land that you live in and things like that. It just changes our philosophies in life, so it makes it really hard to comprehend some of these back and forth arguments itself.
I hear you. So now, what does Rabbi Yitzchak say? Rabbi Yitzchak says there's no malchus by kares. There's no lashes by kares. So again, we had 3 opinions. We have the opinion of Hanuni ben Gamliel says lashes cancels out the kares. We have the rabbis, his friends, who we don't know who those friends are, and they don't say why. Don't disagree with him. I mean, there's many reasons why they would disagree with him. So that means lashes is a tribute. You get the lashes, but it doesn't cancel out the more severe punishment. And then you have Rabbi Yitzchak who says there's no lashes if you get kares. So you get kares, you don't get lashes. How does he know that? The Tanya Bitzchak Omer Chayve Krisis Bechlal Hayuke. There's another rule. The rule is Klal Prat, and when you have a general rule and something is included in the rule, and then the Torah singles out a detail of the rule, then usually the detail is singled out to reflect, to give us insight on the whole rule. It means when something comes out of a rule, so why is it coming out? It means if we say that we're going to see in a second that some different relationships that are forbidden according to the Torah. So in Leviticus and Vayikra we have all the laws. What does Vayikra say? Let's see the pasuk inside. Might as well just do this piece properly. Even though some of the Gemaras that I have over here just are running through it, but we'll just try to have over here. So in the end of Parshas Achrei Mos, this is a part we read on Yom Kippur in the afternoon. So it goes about the different relationships that are forbidden. And then in verse number 29, it says like this: what is the punishment for all these transgressions? So it says, whoever does any of these abominations listed above, the punishment is kares. V'nichrusu is the word kares. That person gets cut off from amongst the people. Then later, the next parsha in Kedoshim, it goes into, again, it singles out a person who has relations with his sister, which was mentioned before also. So why is it singled out a second time? To teach us something. So Rabbi Yitzchak says, Chayve krisis bechlal. The law of a person having relations with his sister was one of the transgressions that mentioned in the previous parsha of Achrei. Why does it say out a second time in Parshas Kedoshim? The Daina Bekaris Malchus to teach us something, that it says that it's only Karis, not Malchus, and so to apply to all the other cases. That means whenever you have Kares, you don't have Malchus. Again, if the Torah uses codes, which is what we say every morning, the 13 principles, that the principles teach us how we're supposed to understand the flow of the Torah and the laws. Torah doesn't repeat itself. Torah doesn't have a letter. You learn in the Gemara that every letter, a vav or a hey or double ba, gzer shava, all the principles that we use to help us understand what the Torah means. That's why we have the oral law and the oral Torah and the written Torah. The written Torah just says things, we don't understand it. Then we have the principles from the oral Torah that helps us understand what the verses are saying. One of the rules is that if something is included, why do you have to separate it a second time? It's only coming to teach us something. And what is it teaching us? That any time there's kares, there's no lash. It's only kares. That's what Rabbi Yitzchak learns. Okay, that's it in a nutshell. Amar Nachman, la'olam ein chalkem alav chaver v'adiktani de'ein zdoini b'yidei adam. So that Rav Nachman says that the fact that we call it that that it's not called b'yidei adam. Why? Because there's also kares included. Hamani Rabbi Yitzchaki, Amar Maseches Megillah, de'ein malkin. Belav, Hanitin Hazaras Karis, Afilu Husser by the Malchus, Vayuftami Mehakra. That Rabbi Yitzchak says that whenever you have Karis, you don't get lashes. And therefore, our Mishnah that says that Shabbos is different than Yom Kippur is talking about Rabbi Yitzchak, but there is no punishment of Malchus. Kol Chayav Krisis Shal Arois Hay Bechlal. V'Nechnu Sor Fashis Isis. We just learned anyone who does one of the violations of relationship gets cut off. These are talking about the violations that the Torah specifies. Shekasu Parshas Arayis, that talks about in the end of Achrei. Lama Yatsa Karis B'Chaisei. So why does the Torah again say a second time in Parshas Kedoshim that a person who has relations with his sister, incest, gets kares? There's a verse that says if a person has relations with his sister, the Donya B'Karis V'Leiv Malchus to teach us that you only get kares, and if you only get kares, that applies to any case in kares. Im hisru behen vaf agav de nida nami nishnas ba'is parsha the davshin chadish ba nishnas la ra. Even though over there also talks about in Kedoshim about a person who sleeps with a woman during her cycle. That's to teach us about the different levels of what kind of level of intimacy is punishable. But let's put that Rashi to the side because it's not our point over here. The point is that why it means Rashi is mentioning that to say the only time we have the rule of Yotzai if only one law comes out. So here it says the Torah mentions two laws. One is you're not supposed to have relations with a woman during her cycle, and you're not supposed to have relations with a sister. So it wasn't one thing that came out. Two things came out. So that was a separate limud to teach us another kind of law. But the law about the general kares is to teach us that kares doesn't get malchus, only gets kares. And therefore our mission is according to Rabbi Yitzchak. And if our mission is according to Rabbi Yitzchak, therefore there's a difference between Yom Kippur. And Shabbos is that Yom Kippur is punishable by person, by Bezdin, and Yom Kippur is punishable only by God. There is no malchus. And therefore the rabbis don't necessarily have to disagree with Reb Chanina ben Gamliel. I'm trying to remember before we quote the Rambam that says that he quotes Reb Chanina ben Gamliel as the law. Yeah, the Rambam quotes Reb Chanina ben Gamliel as the law, meaning to say whenever you get malchus, you don't get kares at that. You don't get punishable. It's not punishable by that. Okay, we have 10 minutes, so we're going to try to do this short Tosfos. Chayav krisis b'chlal hayu pirsha kuntris. Rashi says like this: B'chlal v'nichsu anafashis isis. That the law of sleeping with your sister was already included in all the other marriage relationship laws. V'kashid imkein havelei l'meimer achaysei b'chlal haisa kleimer b'chlal v'nichsu anafashis v'layayu le'lichtayv karispa. The point is like this. I just want to. This is a hard thesis, but we'll try to see if we can learn it. Anyways, the rule is that the going out has to be going out in not just taking the whole law a second time. That's not means when you say something specifically, you have to go away from the law itself, not just the scenario of the law. So here, the whole law is repetitive. The law starts off saying that anyone who has relations with a sister gets kares, and then the Torah just repeats itself. It doesn't go out of the law; it just repeats itself. There's a difference between repeating something and kind of going away from something. So that's Rashi's Tosfos says. "Imkein havle lemeimer achaisi b'chlal haisa klemer b'chlal v'nichser and fashes loyhay lichtayv karespa." They should never have mentioned kares at all. V'ishleimer the hachi pirush chayav krosses b'chlal hayu pirush b'chlal hamalkis. The bechol achs v'achas yesh lav v'lam yotze kares ba'achaisai b'loy lav sharei kares lo yitzrach sharei haisa sharei kares lo yitzrach sharei haisa b'chlal v'nicheshu elavad yotze l'dinner b'kares minay nigmar l'chol acherim kedin dav sharei b'chlal. Okay, I'd rather I understood this Tosfos better myself yesterday when I was preparing the class. But basically, the rule is that Tosfos also says that the fact is that there's Reb Steinzas tries to explain that we have the rule that there's the rule of malchus, that it's not that Rashi learns that achoisei was part of the rule of the incest, the laws of incest, and Tosfos says no, it's not about the laws of incest, it's about the laws of malchus. That why did it say that you would think that incest is part of all the cases where you get lashes? It comes out to teach us it's not part of the laws of lashes. It's only part of the laws of kares. All right, Reb Steinzas will give us a little help on this Tosfos, and we'll have to take it as is. The principle here is a matter that was included in a generalization, but was explicitly excluded in order to teach a halacha, was not excluded to teach only concerning the specific matter at hand. It was rather excluded in order to teach concerning the entire generalization. Okay, when you have a klal and a prat, the prat that goes out of the klal teaches us not just about that specific case, but about all cases. Meaning, not just a person who has relations with a sister only gets a punishment by death, but also no lashes. So too, any kares is only punishable by death with no lashes. In other words, an exception written with regard to a detail applies to the entire generalization. Tosfos explains this slightly different. That's our Tosfos we just learned here. Meaning, Tosfos wants to say that it's not that. From Rashi is more simple, that the Gemara, the Torah says that incest is forbidden in Achrei. It repeats itself in Kedoshim. Why? To teach us something. And what's that teaching us? That it's only punishable by death, not by lashes. Tosfos wants to say the fact that it wasn't included in the laws of lashes because the principle shouldn't be repetitive on the punishment. Right. Let's just do one more. Let's just try to go a little further. Rav Ashi Amar Afil Teimer Rabbanan. We don't have to say that our Gemara is Rabbi Yitzchak only, meaning to say that there's no lashes. Iker is daini b'dei adam is that Iker is daini b'kares, which is a simple answer. Rashi says no. You could say our Mishnah goes that you get lashes and you get kares, or you don't get kares, but you get lashes. But the difference is that the main punishment is done by God. It's just a secondary exemption of lashes. Meaning, if you're going to go according to Rabbi Hanina ben Gamliel, or if the rabbis who disagree with him, either way, but the lashes itself is not the primary punishment. The punishment is to be put to death by God. If you also may get lashes, and the lashes may exempt you, but that the main punishment is by God. And Shabbos, the main punishment is only by man. There is no, so to say, God's punishment on Shabbos. We're talking about God's punishment as far as what He wants to be done. Obviously, God could decide to punish anyone if He chooses so. All right. Afilu Tamer Rabbanan, Rashi says, the Amri Malkus Eitz Lakaris, that there still is Malkus. Afilu Hachi Lek Lemel Fimei Shechalkan Rabbi Chananya. They still may not disagree with Rabbi Chananya ben Hakana, Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel. V'hachi Kamer Masnis in the Shabbos. Ikar Chumrei Zdaini b'Dei Adam. Shabbos is mainly done by a person. And this on Yom Kippur is mainly punishable by God. But if he gets lashes, then he doesn't get punished by God. But the number one punishment of Yom Kippur is by God. And therefore it's different than Shabbos, which is punishable only by the Bezdin. Right? Does everyone understand this besides this complicated Tosus? Ready to go to a little bit into the next Mishnah? I just want to see the Tosus one more time. Just give it a second chance. Okay, I'm going to just read the Tosfos one more time for those who want to follow the Tosfos. So Tosfos is like this: Chai v'krisis b'chlal hayu pirsha kuntris b'chlal v'nichshar nefashis v'kasha. So Rashi says that it was part of what was the klal? The klal was the klal of kares, of incest, of all the other forbidden relations. Im kain havle lemeimer achaisi b'chlal haisa claiming b'chlal v'nichshar nefashis by lichtiv kares. We shouldn't have to be talking about kares. Because if the question is where's the generalization? According to Rashi, the generalization is other forbidden relationships that are punishable by God cutting you off, and then there's no lashes. There's only kares. That's what Rabbi Yitzchak learns. But then you're not excluding anything. You're just repeating it because you're saying the generalization is forbidden relationships gets punishable by God, and then you're saying a sister, which is incest, which is also a forbidden relationship, also gets punished by God. But it's not yotze, it's not going out of the story. Therefore, I say like this: Hachi pirushi chai v'krisis any kares. Anytime a person gets kares, b'chlal hayu hapirush b'chlal hamalkis is included in any time you get malchus. The b'chol achas yesh lav. Every one of a kares, there's a prohibition, and anytime there's a prohibition, if there's witnesses, you get lashes. That's the rule of lashes. Lashes is applied anytime there's a prohibition. So why, by the case of the incest of a sister, does the Torah tell you it's only kares? Beloy lav and doesn't mention a prohibition. Doesn't have to teach us that it gets kares because it's already included in acharei. It's only coming to teach us, surely, that why doesn't it mention a lav? Because it's not a lav, and it doesn't get malchus, and therefore it reflects back on achrei. Right, for those who understood, but that's what Tosfos means to say, is that what is the yotze from? Is it going out of the laws of relationship or the laws of any transgression? According to Tosfos, it's going out of the law of any transgression. In theory, it should get lashes. It doesn't mention any transgression because there is no lashes, and it comes to teach us that all kares, even though you may think you do get lashes, you don't get lashes. All right, everyone, we'll stop here. Next week, we'll start the next Mishnah. These are not easy cases, and I know that they were complicated. I hope we got some understanding of it. Next week, we could start from the more complicated cases of the idea of vows, which is actually what we're learning in Rambam, meaning how does it work when you make a vow about, I don't want to have anything to do with you? You know, the expression, I don't want to have anything to do with you. What does that mean? I don't want to have anything to do with you. What does that include? Or if someone says, I don't want to ever eat by you, what's the difference between eating by someone or saying, I don't want to have anything in general to do with you? And the next Mishnah we'll learn about also talks about the cases of the donations to the temple. What's the difference between a person who says, I'm making a vow to give a donation, or this is a donation. Is it the same thing? A nedava, it means a person says, I'm donating this to the temple. Or someone says, I have to give something which happens to be this. Like, say, I want to give a carbon. So if I say I want to give a carbon, or I want this to be a carbon, it's not the same thing. And therefore the responsibilities are different. We're going to go into everything. Basically, the Torah is helping us be careful in what we say and what we do and what we commit to. And when we're saying something, what does it mean? And what is our responsibility vis-a-vis the commitments that we make? All right, everyone. Again, this was a tough piece of Talmud. Hopefully we held through. Laila Tov, thanks for joining and thanks for everyone's input.